everyone, to the Russell Hobbs Show today. This is where we share life with very interesting, dynamic people, and it's exciting. And I am honored to have a great guest today, Mike Rhyner, a Dallas phenom, is here live in the studio. Hey, Mike.
Hi, Russell. How are you?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Kind of intimidated here.
Are you?
Yeah, I am.
Well,
because yours is a name that I've heard for many, many, many years. And we, along our trails, never really crossed until a couple of weeks ago.
I know it's interesting that way. I've even talked about that theme on our show here, to where I'll know people that are in town for decades, and they're, I'll know them, but like in high school or college or something, we were in different universes,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then our lives collided at one point. But well, don't be intimidated, because I'm more intimidated by you. Okay,
I don't see how.
Well, I grew up listening to a radio station called The Zoo, KZEW, when I was just a middle school and high school guy, and it seriously shaped my life. The cool mix of music that was on The Zoo, and I know you worked there, and the show today is about you, and I want to know more about you, and we're going to discover who you are better. And but that radio station shaped my teen years in my life. To hear, Head East and Humble Pie and Zeppelin, and then go to Mother Blues, and anyway. So thanks for being here today, Michael. And so I was going to ask you, really, just to get started and learn more about you. Where'd you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Pretty normal back then, considering back then was the 50s and into the early and mid 60s. Got out of high school in 1968, born in 1950. Grew up in Oak Cliff, born and lived there my first, more than 18 years. I stayed there for a little while after I was, out of the house and everything. But yeah, I'm an Oak Cliff guy through and through.
Man, and Oak Cliff is such a historic city. So many great world changers have come out of Oak Cliff. I remember my dad used to always say, Oak Cliff's the best part of Dallas. It's beautiful. It's got rolling hills, but they wouldn't give them liquor license. It was dry.
Right.
And so Dallas moved north to Oak Lawn and the Park Cities, and my dad was always, I guess the word would be, still upset that Oak Cliff didn't get its due, because it was his favorite part.
Well, I respect that, because it's my favorite part too, to this day. And I tell people all the time, if you want some fun here in the D, then just say, screw it all. I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive through Oak Cliff today, because you won't believe what you see there. The most picturesque areas that we have here in our Fairburg, most of them are over there. There are some, here and there, and like over at Forest Hills, it's pretty nice and everything. And that area, like out on Northwest Highway, south of there, I guess, it's really nice back in there. But in Oak Cliff, if you know where to go, you will see things that will leave you saying, man, I never knew that was here, and I don't see how that could possibly be here. Because, everybody thinks of Dallas as being very flat. And for the most part, it is, but not in Oak Cliff. Oak Cliff's got hills that would just blow your mind. Everybody should do this.
And really beautiful neighborhoods, too.
Yeah,
like
it's got
Park. And
it's got great neighborhoods. And, it's had its ups and downs, like every part of every big city has, probably. But there are a lot of places in Oak Cliff that have held up really well over the years.
So where'd you go to high school?
I went to Kimball.
Okay.
Kimball is located out on Westmoreland. It's kind of on the edges of Oak Cliff when, I was growing up and everything. Like the place that I lived from, probably 1963 until I got out of school and got out of the house, and really until my mother sold the place, which was in I believe the aughts. That area has held up really, really well. You know, a lot of areas around it have seen their ups and downs and have taken a few lumps over the years. But out there, if you wanted to, you could snatch that area up and put it in any other part of Dallas, and it would hold up pretty nicely.
That's right. Yeah, it's a historic neighborhood. So I want to know, in Kimball High School, you're walking down the hall. Who's Mike Rhyner in high school? What do you like?
Nobody. I was the biggest nobody you've ever seen. Nobody thought anything of me. I had friends, and I was pretty popular. I was pretty outgoing, you know, as at least as outgoing as I could be. But as far as wanting to hang out with me, nobody did. I was just too big of a dork and too uncool. That's why I started playing drums and started getting in bands and stuff, because I had to find some way to try to get the attention of chicks. That didn't work out for me, but still.
Because the lead singer got all the attention.
Oh, yeah,
right?
sure. Drummers, I mean, what was I thinking there? Drummers didn't get any attention.
Right.
But, yeah, I was just a anonymous face in the crowd.
Well, I kind of know how that feels. I was sort of, I wasn't that cool either. I didn't fit with the freaks because they were just a little too strange for me when I was 17 or 18. They were way ahead of me, man. And the Greeks, I didn't fit in. It just seemed a little shallow. So I was in that middle ground, just kind of a regular old person. And so you got into playing drums. You got in a band. What was your first band?
My first band was called The Noblemen. My second band was called The Cornerstones, and it gained a little traction out there. Played teen parties, teen gatherings, teen this, teen that, teen a go-go, that kind of thing. And it got some action out there.
So you're in a band in high school with the same time that Stevie Ray Vaughan was starting to play and ZZ Top in Oak Cliff, right? Which, I don't know if ZZ Top was called ZZ Top at that point. They were probably the Warlocks or something, right?
Yeah.
So what bands did you look up to when you were in school? Who did you try to emulate?
Well, Jimmy Vaughan, Stevie's older brother, had a couple of bands that were really good and better than us and what we wanted to be. One was called the Pendulums. It was a 3-piece band, and they were playing around for a while, but there was this other band called the Chessmen that were pretty big. I mean, they were big enough to the point where they would play, clubs over in North Dallas and stuff. And like occasionally there would be a show or a kind of a troupe show that came with, several acts traveling around playing the show together and everything. But they would need a band to open up for them. And a lot of the time, wherever they went, they'd get a good local band. Well, the Chessmen did that kind of thing quite a bit. And the Chessmen were rolling along pretty good, but then one of their guitar players drowned in White Rock Lake. And they tabbed Jimmy Vaughan to take his place. And that catapulted Jimmy Vaughan to a way, way higher level than anybody else. I didn't know either one of them very well. Steve, as he was known then, auditioned for a band that I was in, or a band that I was starting up. We were looking for a guitar player, and we had a couple of gigs on the calendar. The only thing was we didn't have a band or a repertoire or nothing. We had to get, some shit together really quick. And I put out the word for guitar players to come over and audition one day, and this car pulls up, and out gets this kid who's got no amp. He's carrying a guitar without a case, and I recognized him immediately as Jimmy Vaughan's little brother. He was starting to become, people were saying, "Hey, man, you ought to hear Jimmy Vaughan's little brother. He's really good."
Wow, that's cool. So skinny little Steve got out with his guitar.
Yeah, skinny little Steve out with his guitar. The car let him out and drove off. And he comes in, and he didn't know any of the songs that we knew, and we just couldn't use that. The thing for us to do.
So you wrote Stevie Ray Vaughan a rejection letter.
Actually, what I did was we had a couple of guys waiting outside, and after I saw that he was not going to fit, I just went over, stuck my head out the door, and said, "Okay, who's next?" Sent him on his way. That's a very famous story about me.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, well, things happen for a reason.
They do, and that's what I did. And it's a funny story now, but I got to live with it.
Yes. So your band sort of got better gigs, and you guys got a little traction.
We got a little traction for a while, but then, like we were juniors, had a couple seniors in high school and everything, and by then seniors were getting into girls and everything, and
going off to college.
Serious girls, and then we graduated, and some guys went off to college and everything. And of course, the other thing that we all had to deal with was staying out of Nam. And that was really kind of job one for everybody. Fortunately, at that time, El Centro Junior College downtown was a haven for that. And if you weren't good enough to get into, like a real college, you could hide out there for a while, for a couple of years anyway, if you needed to. And that's the path most took.
Yeah, that's a reality moment right there. We were in a war that was dividing the country, and you were coming out of high school. That's reality.
It was a wild time, man.
Yes,
it was a really wild time. Not so much here because we didn't have a whole lot of activism here
in the Dallas area.
Yeah, in the Dallas area, but in other places, like I used to read Notes from the Underground and all that stuff. Rolling Stone, just anything I could get my hands on. And they were all over things that were going on in other places that were bigger hotbeds of activism than our Fairburg were. And man, it can be pretty sobering to read that and say, hey, you're about that far away from shipping off.
Real far away in a war that was fought in a ridiculous manner. And, we're not really here to get deep into that issue today, but those were, I was young. I'm younger than you. I was younger then, and I was watching it on the news, and the whole era of Vietnam was a dark cloud over our country.
It really was.
And it just, everybody knew it was strange. It was weird to be involved in it. So you were the age where it's like, wow, you could just be taken away any day. And,
I had to figure out what I was going to do about it.
And
so did everybody else.
And not only that, but the cool Vietnam movies weren't out yet.
No,
you couldn't watch Apocalypse Now to get a perspective or something like that.
Yeah, you had the accounts in the newspapers, what you saw on TV, and that was it. But to get the whole picture, you kind of had to wait till those films came out to get the whole picture and the whole vibe. If you weren't there, those pictures were what filled in the blanks for me.
I grew up, my grandfather died in World War II as a pilot, my namesake, but my grandmother remarried, so I grew up with a step-granddad.
Yeah.
And he retired as a 3-star General Air Force. And so I was, growing up, they're like, oh, you need to go to the Air Force Academy, and putting that pressure on me. I was like, I'm not really a military guy, right? Because I was listening to the zoo and going to White Rock Lake, throwing Frisbees and partying with my friends, right? So what's funny, though, is when Apocalypse Now came out, we went to see it with my grandfather, who was a 3-star retired general and a dean of a university. And after the movie, he goes, that was very accurate. And he had missions. He would go to Nam and consult and plan helicopter strategies and such when he was like, before he retired, obviously. But I was amazed to hear him say that the movie was that accurate, and the movies that were coming out about Nam were so accurate as being a guy on the inside, because a lot of them, there's a lot of exaggeration and hyperbole in movies, and they make it more interesting. But to hear a 3-star general say that was accurate, it was really sort of eye-opening. So,
did that surprise you?
It did. It surprised me, and
man, it would have shocked the hell out of me.
Yeah, it surprised me, and it's like, it made me I gained some perspective that the war was chaotic mess. It really was, and most wars are. So I want to get back to tell us how you got from being in bands into radio. How'd you first get in radio?
I always loved radio. from the time I was a kid on. I'm at a loss to tell you exactly why, but there was just something magical about it for me. Number one, it was always on in our house when I was a real little kid because my mom loved music, and she always had it on in the house. And I would hear those guys come on and talk. And I thought, well, that sounded cool. Maybe one might think I would outgrow that, but I never did. And as I matriculated through junior high and high school, while all my friends at night would be watching Love That Bob or My Mother the Car or whatever, I was back in my room with a transistor radio, listening to Russ Knight, The Weird Beard on the Mighty 1190 KLIF. And it seemed like those guys were talking to everybody in the world to me. Now, later on, I would find out that no, that's kind of not the case, but that's just the way it seemed. It was magic. And I thought, boy, it'd really be neat if I could do something like that. But every time I would bring it up to somebody, I'd bring it up to my parents and go, no, you could never do that. You're not like that. Or I'd bring it up to my friends, say, man, I'd love to be one of those guys on the radio. They'd get the fuck out of here, you know? And I never really started to take the idea seriously until I got in my 20s, and it was still with me, except my goals had changed. What I wanted to be then was a baseball broadcaster. And I figured that the way to do this would be first, just get in any way you can. Just show up and tell whoever's there that you will do anything for anybody, anytime, any hour of day or night. And that's what I tell, kids all the time or people all the time who tell me they want to get into radio now. I tell them, just show up and let them know that you're willing to do anything. And you'll do it for no money. You just want to get in. And that's kind of where I was. Well, I'd heard that at KZEW, one of the guys on the morning show was going to be going away, and he was going to become a lawyer. He was getting out of the game. And I had a friend who knew who to put me in touch with. And so I called him, and sure enough, the person I was to get in touch with was the guy who was going away. And I said, I hear you're leaving, or I hear you might need some help down there. And at first he went, what? Need some help? I said, yeah, I hear somebody's going away to college, and they need somebody to do some things, and I'll do it. And he kind of went, oh, yeah, come on down here today. Let me show you around a little bit.
They didn't quite fill him in on the task.
Right. Well, I went down there, and he showed me around. He took me to the place, or took me to where the guy that I was going to be doing it with, or who had been doing it, was at. And he showed me around. That guy today is one of my best friends in the world. I've worked at now 2 different radio stations with him. But he was one who was going away to college, or one of the ones who was going away to college, and he showed me what they were going to need me to do, and I wormed my way in there somehow. And that's what got me in. And I made it known to everybody that, I will do anything for anybody, all hours, day or night. I don't care. Just load me down with stuff that you need. And they were only too happy to do it, and I kind of made my way up through there.
Which station was that?
This was the Zoo.
Okay. And so on air at that point was like LaBella and Rhodey and Dylan?
Well, when I first got there, Dylan was there. Mm-hmm. LaBella was there, but Rhodey was not. Mm-hmm. And this is a very interesting Rhodey story. I'm not sure that this is true, but number one, it's a funny story. Number two, it's very, very much like him to the point where I can see.
As long as you got the disclaimer on it, we're cool.
Okay. Well, what happened was, Rhodey was very difficult to manage back then. He was always getting into squabbles with management. And he got into one big one to the point where he was really, really pissed, as the story goes one day. Now, I didn't see this, but as the story goes, he was really pissed. And he was in the newsroom yelling and screaming and stuff one day, and, just generally scaring the hell out of everybody else who was in there. And on the wall, they had this map of the United States, and it was on a cork board. And there were darts in there. And supposedly, as the story goes, he said, I'm going to throw this dart at that map of the United States, and wherever it lands, I'm going to get a job there and get out of here. And nobody took him seriously or anything like that. Well, he threw the dart at the board, and it landed on Billings, Montana. And a couple of days later, he came in there and said, I'm out of here. I got a job in Billings, Montana, and I'm going. And that was it. And that was where he was when I got to the zoo. Now, immediately after they saw that he was really serious, they had the idea of pairing him up with LaBella on the morning show. But the first thing they had to do was get him back here. And that was not going to be easy, but they tried and stayed after it and everything. And they did. He came back, and that's how the LaBella and Rhodey show was born.
Wow. Well, it sounds pretty true to me.
Like I say, I can't totally vouch for it, but it's very much in keeping with Rhodey. And especially but the Rhodey of back then. That's very much like something he would do.
So I want to know, to me, programming was like so luscious with that station, you know. So you were involved in programming somewhat eventually.
Yeah.
How did you guys, tell us just, how did you work the programming of the zoo? You know, it was like so perfect.
Well, yeah, in its early days, like before I got there, it was, and for a while after I got there. But then shortly after I got there, the scourge of the industry came in. And the scourge of the industry is consultants. And they hooked up with a consultant. And the consultant told them what to do, what to play, how to do it, how to conduct your breaks, how to program spots, how to do news, how to do everything. And consultants are very, very expensive. And they said, okay, if we're going to have a consultant, we're going to pay this guy this money for telling us what to do, then we're going to do it like he tells us to do it. And that kind of took the starch out of it for everybody. I mean, it was still good for a while, and I don't think anybody was any worse for the wear on the outside as far as knowing that stuff goes. But on the inside, it was very demoralizing.
Yeah, you're taking the creative control away from the creative people. Mm-hmm. And so the board sort of wants to bring in a consultant to make it more profitable, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then the consultant, I'm sure, is subject to commercialism and different agendas besides a cool radio station. And, you know, I'm not really a radio expert, so it's intriguing.
You're on the right track here.
It's intriguing to me to see how it was working back then, because now everything's all different. But back then, you guys were...
Well, everything's all consulted. The only thing that's not consulted is the zoo. I mean, is the ticket.
Yeah, the ticket. Well, that's a whole... Yeah, the ticket's a whole nother amazingly innovative, pioneering job that you were a major part of. But let's stick on the zoo for a minute, because to me, I want to give homage to the zoo in a way, because it was such a lifestyle to be a teen in Dallas. And I just had this flashback hit me. It's like Thanksgiving with the family. And then my cousin and she was a girl younger than me. We couldn't wait to get out of the family dinner and get in the car and drive around listening to the zoo, you know? And the zoo it was like you guys were the real promotional minstrel for the city of Dallas. You know, one week you go to, we saw like Blue Oyster Cult and Jim Dandy at the Fair Park parking lot, you know, for a can of canned goods.
Yeah.
And then the next week it was, you know, everybody's at White Rock Lake partying. And then the party then moved to Lee Park. And it was like the zoo led that whole movement of the late 70s. I don't know if it went far into the 80s, but by the 80s, I mean, Dylan was still doing really great stuff in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. You know, Dylan would have I'd bring local bands to the studio every Sunday night that we had bands that were playing at the clubs in Deep Ellum, and he'd let us bring them in the studio and take over the studios. Super cool still. But back in my formative years, the zoo was like a force in this city. of it was a scene maker.
Yeah. And again, that was all taken away from them by consultants, by corporate minions, and by the idea of, well, we know we got a really strong imaging and all that stuff going on here, and the music's great, but we're not making any money. So let's figure out how we can make some money off of this thing, or we're going to kill it. And that's where the consultant came in. The consultant went to them and said, hey, I can do this for you. I can get you where you want to be. I can make you profitable. And, you know, when those guys hear that, that's all they need to hear.
So I'm hearing that you were in a band, you were all into music, but your first ambition goal in radio was to be more in sports.
Yeah.
And so you got your radio door open for you at the zoo, learn the industry. Now, how'd you transition over into sports and sports radio and the ticket, and how'd all that come to pass?
Well, first, I brought sports to the zoo morning program. They decided they needed some sort of element because they poked their heads up out of the sand long enough to look around and see, hey, this Cowboys team, people pay attention to that, don't they? And yeah, they kind of do. They say, okay, well, and LaBelle and Rhodey decided they needed some kind of sports element on their morning show. And so they said, look, why don't you produce our show and do sports? And I said, well, hell yeah, I'll do it. And that turned out to be the main crux of what I did during my time there, was produce the LaBella and Rhodey morning show and do sports 3 times a day. 3 times a morning.
So you talk about the world famous Cowboys.
Yeah.
And then, soccer was starting a little. You guys probably didn't talk about soccer.
No. We talk about baseball. Mavericks.
Yeah.
This is right when the Mavericks were coming online.
Right.
And
when did the Rangers start? Was that right there too?
no, they moved here in 72. The Rangers moved
Early
here.
70s.
Yeah, they moved here in 72. Made their way up through the early 70s, and like I say, I started doing that in 81, I think, and on from there.
Wow. That's amazing. So the ticket was another Dallas phenomenon of culture, really. I mean, the ticket came out of nowhere, and then everybody's listening to the ticket. And what was cool is, you guys were blending sports, music, culture, history, so where'd that brain child lightning bolt come from?
By that time, I had fallen under the spell of the great Howard Stern, who had come into the market, and I started listening to his show. And I noticed the conversational nature of it between him and not only Robin Quivers, but just everybody who was on there. Fred, Baba Booey, Stuttering John, all of them, They all seemed to have just I don't know, anybody could say anything anytime they wanted to, And I thought that was pretty neat. And by this time, sports radio was starting to turn up all around the nation. Like, by then I was married, I had a young daughter and everything. Sometimes we would go to a big city on vacation. And while there, one of the things that I enjoyed most was listening to sports radio. And I saw how they did it and everything. And I started making mental notes. And one of the mental notes that I made was, okay, if you were to do this, the biggest challenge would be managing the downtime. If there's a big sports story going on out there, anybody can do that. Anybody can get on there and talk about the big sports story. What do you do when there's not one? That's managing the downtime. And I thought, okay, that's going to be the biggest job for any sports radio station. They're going to have to know how to manage the downtime.
And that's the key to having extended hours.
Yeah.
And keeping people listening rather than just a 30-minute show or whatever.
Right. And that's the key to that all-important TSL in radio, time spent listening. And
you learn that from the consultants, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But that was going to be, the biggest obstacle for anybody. And it just so happened, and this is the biggest random confluence you could possibly imagine. It just so happened that at the time I was going to all these places like Chicago and Boston, Seattle, maybe one or two others, and hearing sports radio and hearing how they did it, what they did, and everything like that. I was running into a guy whose dad dealt in radio stations. Like he bought them and sold them. And he had been in the game in some nebulous fashion. He was wanting to get back into it. Well, one day he calls me up and says, "Are you ready to play sports radio?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I found a guy with a little bit of money, and he wants to start a sports radio station here. And so what we ought to do is we ought to get together for lunch, and let's go over everything we've talked about." Because by then, he and I had long conversations about this, about 6 or 7 of them. So we went to the Dixie House, Lakewood, one day for lunch. We ate. He wrote. I talked. And I don't know what became of those pages of a legal pad, but wherever they are, whatever they were, that was the first time anything tangible that would one day turn into the ticket came about. And we just went from there.
So you got the green, and now you met to crystallize the vision.
Yes.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. It just so happened that I was hanging around some guys who I found rather amusing, and they were guys who I thought might be able to do this. And so I started talking them up. Well, those guys didn't know them. I said, "Look, you're just going to have to trust me here," which they had no real inclination to do. But I started talking about it to the guys that I knew and recruited them, and that's where it took off.
Right, because the key there was you wanted really good chemistry.
Yeah.
So the people that you wanted to bring on, your friends, and that inspired you, you had that cool chemistry. If you brought in a couple of superheroes that didn't get along, it doesn't work.
It would have never worked.
Right.
It would have never worked any other way than what it did. I believe that.
Beautiful. Yes, yes. Well, it's been it's been such an addition to I look at life real simple. I'm a human on a planet. We're spinning through space. I'm from Dallas, and things that you've been involved with and worked hard on made my life better. Having the zoo as part of my life, having the ticket as part of my life, where I could learn things on listening to the ticket. From people, real smart people like Norm Hitzkiss or something, right?
Yeah.
And I could also be entertained, and it's like the cultural blending of, it's a radio station, yes, but it's also part of people's lives, and the influence that you've had, and the way it's like, hey man, we're having ticket stock, and
yeah,
people live for that stuff. It's like it's adding quality to people's lives, and for better or for worse, right?
Yeah. That was stolen from the zoo. Ticket stock was, because they had Zoo World.
Yes. And
Ticket stock was a knockoff of Zoo World. In fact, the guy who was going away to college, whose place I took, he came back and for years handled promotions at the Ticket and started Ticket stock. Ticket stock was his baby, his invention, and that boy was and still is a freaking genius at this sort of thing.
Wow. So, I got a question. Everybody knows you as the old wolf, the old gray wolf. Where'd that name come from?
That was never supposed to see the light of day, but that was kind of a pet name that my then wife had for me. She would call me Wolf because she said, "You got wild hair," and I had a wild curly fro kind of thing going on. Clearly that's changed. And I
still have some great hair though.
Hey. Well, I don't know about that.
You're looking good.
Thank you.
Looking good.
Thank you. You are too.
Well, You got me beat in the hair department.
Well, I'm just glad I got what I got. And I had a beard and everything, and she said I looked very wolfen, and she started calling me Wolf. And nobody ever really knew that. Just kind of a thing between me and her. But our daughter heard her call me that. And one day, up at the radio station, I had to bring my daughter up there. We had to kind of shuttle her back and forth between daycare. We both worked and everything. And I had to go get her and bring her back up there for a couple hours until I wrapped up what I was doing. And one day I'm walking through there, and there's a conversation going on in the area where all the cubicles were, where we all used to hang out. And as I walk by, here is Gordon Keith, of all people, saying, Mike, what kind of, I just picture yourself just walking by and getting hit with this. What kind of pet names does Renee have for you? And I kind of thought for a second, I don't know. I don't think she ever has, I don't think she has any. And my little girl said, yes, she does. Mommy calls you the Wolf. And that's Gordon awesome. Keith is the wrong guy for that, something like that to get into his hands. So he took it. He started calling me Wolf. He said, spread it around up there before long. Everybody was calling me Wolf. And the older I got and the grayer I got, it just morphed into old gray. And finally one day I thought, don't fight this. Don't fight it. Just go with it.
Well, and it's a cool nickname. It really is.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I kind of dig it now.
I'm telling you.
I'm glad I did.
Wolves are one of the coolest animals. There's so much to learn from them, right? I can watch hours of Nature Channel about the wolf pack.
Oh, yeah. It's fascinating
and
stuff.
so it's a very cool totem, or whatever we're going to call it. Right? Yeah, it's a cool thing. And I guess that's your spirit animal now.
I guess it is. All right, can we turn the tables here?
Oh, well, what do you mean by that?
I got a lot of questions for you, too.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll take a few questions.
All right. First of all, I was hearing your name well before the ticket started. And really probably while I was at the zoo was the first time I started reading it and hearing it. And I wasn't a big Deep Ellum attendee. Or back then, that was kind of in my so-called dark period. So I didn't go down there, didn't hang out too much. But every time I read a story about it, here is Russell Hobbs in there somewhere. And all this time, our paths just never crossed until last week or something like that?
I know, it's beautiful. We ran into each other at the studio here where you produce a show.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did you get into that, and how did you get to be such a big player in that? I could tell you're a man of vision. Well,
thank you. That's a great compliment from another man of vision. I think my whole trip was, I was going to college and changing degrees.
Where?
I went to North Texas.
Okay.
Well, first I went to Richland. And
I did the tour of the Dallas County Community College District too.
I was the guy. My parents said, "We'll send you to any college you want to go to," and I was stubborn. I should have taken that ticket, but instead, I paid my own way through Richland, and studying biology. And then I went to North Texas to do pre-med, and I just, one day I was like, man, I don't want to be a doctor, and chemistry sucked, but I liked biology. I liked, I could take I opened up the frog and took his heart out, and he's still living, and my professor said, you have the hands of a surgeon, but you don't study. And I was like, oh, okay, well, so then I changed. So I got in and out of college, right? So then I was working at this oil company and, just trying to make money to pay the bills, So finally I said, screw it. And I just went to Deep Ellum, and I just got a warehouse, and I was like, I don't want to be any part of Dallas. I don't like the mall. I don't like the shiny buildings, the shiny clothes, the shiny cars, the whole materialism that I've grown up in this mall cloning of Dallas, Texas. I got over it. I had to escape, right? So I rented this huge building in Deep Ellum and started an art gallery and booking bands, and they're just really parties, to have fun, and created a world that I wanted to live in. And
had you ever booked bands or anything like that before?
Well, I had previously I had a warehouse on Forest and Greenville for 6 months just to get away from it all. I had my boat in there and my car, and we'd have beer parties with rock bands a couple of times. My girlfriend knew a band or something, but when I went to Deep Ellum, it was and this is your show, so I don't want to use up too much time. But when I went to Deep Ellum, it was like, that's it. And so in a way, I quit cutting my hair. I started walking down the central tracks in Deep Ellum, and I just saw the history. And I started reading about Deep Ellum, the freedman town of the 1870s.
Yeah.
And the Jewish landlords were renting to the blacks, and they created their own theater and culture and the music phenomenons that came out of there, and into the 20s and 30s, the blues scene and everything. So I was liberated by moving to Deep Ellum. I was baptized in the history of Deep Ellum. I quit cutting my hair. We used to be outside the back of the theater gallery, like with a fire, cooking beans and drinking whiskey and listening to the blues, and then we had the art gallery, and I met painters at North Texas. And it was really just, it smelled like oil all the time. It was like avant-garde, politically motivated painting. And then the bands coming like, Zeitgeist and the Flaming Lips and The End and Three on a Hill and Reverend Horton Heat, and so it was a lifestyle. I dove into it all the way, So I think the reason I ended up being sort of the spearhead of that movement, to me, that was like another. When I grew up listening to the Zoo, and we'd go to White Rock Lake and Lee Park and Mother Blues, that was a world I liked.
Yeah.
But that world kind of went away.
Yeah, it did.
And so in the early 80s, I was looking for I'd grown up a bit, and I knew what I liked, and I was creating a different world. And so, the Deep Ellum thing kind of blew up, and we created a world. And then, 6 or 8 months into it, I got, Jeff Lyles came in. He was my booking guy. And we're still close today. We're working on some stuff. And then we opened the Profit Bar because, there was a bootlegging incident, and we had to open the Profit Bar, the artistic saloon, for the sake of money to keep the theater gallery going.
Yeah.
So to me, it was a counterculture movement of searching for truth through the arts, and throw off your mall clothes and be who you are.
Yeah.
That God's created you to be. I wasn't preaching God necessarily yet, but I knew there was just something more. It was transcendent.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. I mean, that anytime anybody has the stones to go off on their own like that, and they've got some sort of vision, even if it's not a real clear vision. I mean, believe me, when I started the ticket, I had a vision, but it was not a real clear one. It was and it turned out to be far more multifaceted than I ever thought it would be. It turned out to be far more involved and just had a lot of aspects to it that I hadn't even thought of yet. And
right. As the instigator, you see the vision, blurry.
Yeah.
And the more people that you bring around, then their contribution comes in, and it crystallizes and becomes bigger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it makes me see that, look, you're the big picture guy here. These other people are going to be the ones who fill in the detail and really prop the thing up, get it running, make sure that that all the various aspects of it are talking to each other, and really turn it into something productive.
That's right.
And that's sounds like something you know a little about.
Right. And what happens, and this too, is your vision sort of starts off with a pure goal of either creating a great radio station or a great venue or part of town, and then commercialism is inevitable. So you start with the purity,
right?
And then it takes money to make things happen. I was so idealistic back then, and still am, I guess, somewhat, but I wasn't thinking of the money at all. I mean, when the fact that the bills were piled up and we had to pay rent again, oh yeah, it's like the money motivation just wasn't there. I really wanted to experience life and create a place that was different, because I'd traveled around. I've been to Mexico seeing art galleries in Mexico City. I'd been, to Europe, and it's like to see the way the world is so culturally different than Dallas was. Dallas was very vanilla, the suburbs, and North Park was cool, but it just seemed restrictive to me. And so I think we started the ball rolling in Deep Ellum, and it grew into a super cool scene for 10, 15 years.
What did you think about, I mean, the first time you ever heard that something like that might be possible in Deep Ellum? Had you ever even considered Deep Ellum before? Because when I was growing up and I thought of Deep Ellum, the very, very few times I had to drive through there for one reason or another, all I saw were rundown bars, binderies. They used to have a lot of those down there. Laundry places where they would have the doors open. It'd be the middle of summer. It'd be 100 degrees outside, but when you walked by there, there'd be stuff blowing out of there that was like 120 degrees. That's all it was down there. And right. I was very aware of the history of the place and that things weren't always that way, but I just thought, man, what's anybody ever going to do with this?
Well, yeah, when I went in '84, it was a pretty much a ghost town. There was Hedgecock Artificial Limb. There was Texas Butcher Supply. There was a brake shop on Elm. There were a few artists living in lofts and warehouses, you know, painting. And it was cheap, and you could get away and focus on your art, you know. So really, when I moved in there, it was like to get the theater gallery building with a tin ceiling, and it was huge. It'd hold 1,000 people. And we started ripping off everything out of there, the lay-in ceiling, anything that was modern or man-made. We just like took it away and went down to the bricks and the tin and the concrete cracked floor. And it was the kind of thing where we'd say, oh, let's put a door in here, and we'd start like hammering on a brick wall, and that there was already a door there like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It was spooky, right? We're like sort of reviving this thing back to life. So to answer, I guess what you're really asking is, I mean, I was looking to a place to paint, make an art gallery, have bands play, and live a lifestyle. And then it just so happened that multitudes of other people wanted to come do it too. You know, so when The End, a band from Highland Park played, they brought like 300 kids from the Park Cities. And Three on a Hill was bringing kids from Plano later in '85. And, you know, so all these people just started coming there. For a year, we were completely off the radar of the city or the police or anything. It was a super secret underground, no signage, no promotion, artistic exploration, you know, to enjoy our lives.
I bet that's a pretty special time in your memory right now.
Oh yeah, it was a special 5 years, really, 5 to 7, 8 years there. It's super cool.
Yeah, because I mean, the early days of the ticket, I mean, we had no ratings. I thought that people were listening to us because I would have people come up to me who did remember me from the zoo, even though that had been like 7 years prior or something like that. And they'd come up to me and say, hey, man, I love what you guys are doing now. It's good to have you back on the radio again. And I don't know. It's just one of those crazy things that carries over between, you know, through time, I guess. But
so when you say you had no ratings, tell me more about that.
Oh, well, back then, or let me start with now. Now radio stations get ratings every month. And you can tell how you're doing every month. Back then, they got them 4 times a year. So when ratings came out, whatever it was, good or bad, you're going to have to live with those things for a while. And however your ratings are, that's how you sell the radio station. That determines how much commercials cost on the radio station. And, you know, businesses want to go to places that can show them that, hey, we've got listeners. Well, for a while, we couldn't do that. And we just had to have our salespeople talk them into it. Now, once they did, they were very, very happy.
They had the results from advertising.
Yeah.
Contrary to when you see the ratings are great and you spend money there and you don't get any results. Which happens a lot, right?
I mean, then and now, one thing the ticket has always done is it does get results for its advertisers. Now, it's a very expensive proposition now and has been for a long time, but you get what you pay for in this world. And you pay for that, and the ticket will deliver now and then as well.
Well, it's a very loyal listener base, and you've got a real targeted
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah, it's very well targeted, and the loyalty of those people is just off the charts, and it always has been. It's kind of turned over the years. There are some people who've fallen away. We don't hear from them much anymore, but their place is being taken all the time by others, and the cult of the ticket is as strong now as it has ever been, maybe stronger.
I believe that. So I want to ask you this, because, we, as amazing as this is, we can't go forever. There's a time constraint. So what are you passionate about now? And I know you're in a band.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm in a little cover band. We cover Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. We're called Petty Theft, and we've been doing it for coming up on 20 years. We'll start into our 20th year next year, and the end is not in sight. We stay booked about as much as we want to stay booked, and it's still a lot of fun, still something I really enjoy. I don't mind getting up there and singing Free Fallin' for these people.
That's awesome. So you're playing drums?
No, I'm playing acoustic guitar, mostly acoustic, and singing now.
Okay. So you've now you're getting all the chicks.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, which is what I wanted anyway.
Well, that's so. If nothing else, of all these great things you've been involved in, and you're a Dallas. What's the word? I don't want to say fixture. That's silly. Legend. I mean, you're a guy that's from here, and you've contributed so much to everybody's life in the city. And now you've gone from being a drummer that didn't really get the chicks like the singer was. Now you're actually up front, and you got that opportunity.
Yeah.
If you wanted the chicks.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I'm a little old for that, but still, it's nice to know you can.
Well, the chicks don't think you're old.
No.
Okay, we got the phone's ringing off the hook right now. Okay,
that's the cool thing.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Did you guys ever play Deep Ellum as any of your bands?
Well, Petty Theft has a time or two.
Okay.
We used to play. Oh God, I can't think of the room down there. It's not Trees. It's the one that's kind of down from it a little bit.
Oh, let's see.
East of there.
East of Trees.
It'll come to me. It's one of the bigger rooms,
On the north side of Elm, like Trees, or
no? It's on the south side of
Elm. So
Elm.
Dada.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Dada.
Yeah.
We played Dada a few times, and there have been a couple of other one-off things that we've done down there over the years. It's fun.
Awesome.
I always liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, when we started playing Dada, I kind of felt like we'd made it a little bit.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so here's a question I ask every guest, and it's been good hearing how your life path took you to some beautiful, interesting places, and just getting to know more about you. So here's a question I ask every guest towards the end of the show. Usually, what about God? What's your experience or your take on God?
My experience and my take on God is, I probably would be considered an agnostic. I don't deny the being, and I do think that there are things and circumstances going on out there in the universe that we don't know about and that we can't control, and that are operating on a plane far, far greater than we are. I'm not sure that manifests itself necessarily as God, or on the flip side of that, Satan. But I do believe in forces. I do believe in forces that cause people to be in the same place at the same time, and it either brings them together or it doesn't.
Right, like an orchestrating effect.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I respect the agnostic position, because it's saying that you just don't know necessarily, or it's beyond knowing.
Right.
I mean, atheists.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm an atheist.
Yeah, no, atheists to me are like, oh, come on, you just hadn't thought it through, or there's a reason you want to be an atheist. Like my boys, I've got a 20-year-old and 18-year-old, and they grew up in private school, and I was publicly became a born again Christian long ago, and I mean I believe I've met the resurrected God. I believe he came in a body, He hugged the lepers, forgave the prostitutes, and told the religious leaders they're a bunch of snakes. He died. He rose. I feel like I've met him, in 87, in my janitor's apartment. But my son, a few years ago, he was like, I don't know, what are you putting on your college entrance thing? And he's like, I'm a Buddhist. I was like, I don't, you don't know Buddha. What do you do? I said, what do you really believe? And he told me where he was. And I said, dude, you're an agnostic. You just, and I respect that. To me, agnostic is a humble position. You're saying that it's so big and you just don't know if you have it figured out, or to put it in a box, right? So I like that in a way,
Well, I would never say that. No, it flat out does not exist, and it's insane to think that. Or I also would never say, oh yes, it definitely exists. I just don't know.
Yeah, and that's so honest. And to me, honesty is the best path to live our lives on. Honesty gets us where we're supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I dig that. It's beautiful. Well, once again, your honesty is admirable.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and
that's what I try to be with everybody.
Yeah. And it's like there's power in that. You know what I mean? If everybody on the planet right now was completely honest, just think how different the world would be.
It's hard to fathom.
It is. All these agendas would fall away.
Yeah.
And everybody would just be normal, humble humans to each other. That would be like I remember I used to think of honesty all the time. It's like the more I was honest with myself and other people, the more free I felt.
Yeah.
And the more I felt like I could connect to life, and happiness comes from that, right?
Yeah, it does.
Really does. It does. It's a beautiful thing. Okay, so I have to plug my sponsor here. This is a book I wrote, and it's for sale, on Amazon or whatever. So check it out. Check out the book. These are things I've written over a decade, really, and it's like a lot of searching and seeking. Why do we suffer? Mm-hmm. If there's a God, why is He letting everybody suffer?
Yeah.
You see the preachers on TV, and everything's so easily answered. And I've been to church through my life, and everything. And church and religion turns people off. So my book covers a lot of that stuff. I feel like I'm selling to you, but I'm actually selling it to the people out there.
I'll sell it to me.
In land.
I'll read it now.
I'll give you one. What I'm saying is that I think I've actually gotten some answers, because in this life, we're seeking, we're searching, and we do get answers as we go through the decades. And so I'm sharing some of these in this book. So I recommend it, And but it's good to know that we don't have to worry about anything. It really is. And it's also evident, like you said, when you see paths cross and coincidence happens, you know that there's a power greater than us. And I know it's a loving power. Even though it looks like a mess, I know it's a loving power that's helping us.
I hope it is.
Yes.
It's got to be.
Well, thanks for coming today, and I'm just honored to have you here, and it was really fun. And I'm sorry that, we have this time thing that we have to stop. I mean, it'd be cool to have a 4-hour show, and we could have some people join us, and you get Howard Stern in here or something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks you, Mike.
Russell, thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it. Really nice to meet you, man. Nice to meet a legend that I've heard of for all these years.
Well, thank you so much. And where's your band playing next?
Friday night, we're going to be out in Azle, reaching the outposts at Music in the Park at the Central Park Amphitheater. Everybody out Azle way, come see us.
That's awesome. Thank you. And we'll see you next time on the Russell Hobbs Show. Thank you for joining.